Well, we've heard some news from Disney, some fun announcements, some head scratchers and surprising ones, a lot of info, and I'm here to tell you my 5 big takeaways from Disney's Destination D23 announcements. Let's do this. You're listening to the Tomorrow Society podcast. Hey there, thanks for joining me here on episode 207 of the Tomorrow Society podcast. I am your host, Dan Heaton, and I am actually recording this for the first time ever from a hotel room. I spent a lot of today on my way to a regional theme park that I have never been to, Kings Island. More on that down the road. But today, I am here to tell you my thoughts on the announcements that Disney made this morning on the live stream, for me at least, but for others in person at the Destination D23 event in Florida. There were thoughts they might not really announce anything. There were other thoughts they were going to announce huge expansions. We kind of fell somewhere in the middle, and I'm okay with a lot of it. I wasn't blown away, like I want to book my trip tomorrow, but I also, most of the announcements kind of make some sense to me. But I'm going to dig into everything that Disney announced with Josh D'Amaro and others, and a lot of Muppets were there, though no Muppets announcement. And I'm going to frame it around my 5 takeaways. So within those takeaways, and I'm going to talk about all the different announcements, and then I'm also at the end going to summarize my thoughts on everything, including things maybe I hadn't talked about yet, and how I feel this impacts where Disney is going in the future. So let's get right to it. Let's dive into my 5 takeaways from Disney's Destination D23 announcements. Here we go. Number 1. Disney learned from the feedback to last year's D23 Expo and delivered a smoother presentation. Now, it wasn't perfect, I have to say. I was a little skeptical, and while the house band made it livelier, it also led to some moments where you got to a point where you're like, okay, we get it, Josh. We don't need this much content with the live band. And even the Muppets, while funny, I enjoyed the moment when Sam Eagle thought the president was going to come out, and it was the president of Walt Disney World, who then proceeded to give out $100 gift cards to 100 people in the audience. Not sure you need Jeff Valley, the president of Walt Disney World, to do that. So there were moments that nothing was up there with, interviewing the Target dog for a long time, or just some of the other weird brand activations that Bob Chapek has come to. Things have gotten better, but I think overall it moved pretty well, especially after a bit of a slow start where, Josh D'Amaro talked about how big a fan he is and his family and everything else. And there were a few dips from there. They moved fairly quickly. I mean, there were times where you have to remember, part of this really felt a bit like a commercial for Disney's theme parks, which that's kind of what it is. But it especially felt that way this time because there was less of Josh D'Amaro giving a presentation, like where he just talks and talks and talks. And instead, he yielded the floor to so many different people, some pre-recorded segments, like with the King Thanos attraction with Brent Strong, or Daniel Joseph, Tomorrow Society podcast guest Daniel Joseph, 2 times, was out there talking about the Hatbox Ghost, or you had just a variety of Imagineers and others who came out and talked about things rather than it being more of a, here is my vision for the parks. And I think that was a good update, where at times the transitions were a little awkward, but it did allow them to kind of mix in clips instead of it being more of a speech or, something it felt more like a corporate pep rally, which that is kind of how it felt near the beginning, actually. It felt a little bit that way where you're trying to get the audience involved. But it got a lot better because they were able to kind of get in a good groove and they're making some announcements, some things we know, some things we don't know. And I found it to be mostly effective where the time went by and it got to the point where I was like, wow, this is moving pretty quickly. And, there were no long musical numbers. Like if I think about the past, even with Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins or some of the other numbers where you felt like they were filling in a way where you're like, no, we're wasting time. We need to get to the announcements. Here, with it being a tighter presentation, started around 8:15 Central, 9:15 Eastern, and went till 10:30 Eastern, and they really stuck to the time. So it was it seems weird to say it was tight when it was still 75 minutes, but it didn't feel super long, and they were able to kind of, while some of the attempts to make it have some levity were a little painful, it did lead to where you didn't feel like they were just filling after the beginning. There were parts of the beginning where I was like, okay, let's go. Come on, let's move. I didn't know how to type any notes or I wasn't sure I was going to need to. And then as it went along, I felt like, okay, now they're getting somewhere. We're finally making some announcements. And I didn't really go in. I mean, I know I recorded a quick hits episode for the members of Tomorrow Society talking about what I hoped they would announce. And some of it they sort of did as far as the Animal Kingdom, which I'll talk about in a minute. They did not dig into much at Disneyland really at all, but Tomorrowland at Disneyland, which I still felt like is something they need to focus on, which at some point they're going to have to. They didn't talk about that at all. And they didn't really do updates to Imagination, though obviously there's one update that we'll dig into. But overall, I felt like it was a smooth presentation. Josh D'Amaro is already a big step up from Bob Chapek, but even he could not really save last year's D23 Expo. And even the Destination D23 2 years ago, the thing I remember the most of that is we're bringing back the churros and all of that. I remembered more of that than I remembered like what they announced or anything. A lot of it was just they're bringing things back and they had all the people come out and it was very strange, the end of it. But the end of this one was also kind of strange too, in a different way. But it does seem like they're starting to find their footing. I'm not saying everything was like, wow, they recognize the threat of Epic Universe or they're really thinking they need to do all these big things. It still felt a little bit like they're taking a cautious approach, or the fact that the stock price is down and there's, obviously one thing that's really noticeable here compared to the D23 Expo where you had all the actors and people like Jon Favreau were involved in everything. With the actor and writer strikes, you didn't really have anyone like that. I mean, you had the Muppets and then Dave Gulls shows up and Imagineers, but you don't have what you typically would do is kind of bring in people from the various properties to kind of talk it over or even just get excited about it. And that's something they really couldn't do here because the actors and writers aren't going to come because they're on strike. In one sense, you might say, oh, well, it wasn't the big names, but in another sense, it kept them from getting as distracted. I felt like they were able to focus more on what they were there for, which is one, it's a commercial for Disney and their theme parks. Two, to make some announcements to get people excited. And three, to just kind of remind us, hey, there's some cool stuff at the parks. There's cool stuff coming. And we all like being here. And let's enjoy that as fans, which is never a bad thing. Number two, Disney made a smart decision to change their plans for Disney's Animal Kingdom. This is really the headline of the entire day, is that Disney has changed the approach. And again, I should clarify that as Disney mentioned on this presentation, I thought they would never mention that thought experiment with Chris Beatty and Jennifer Lee again. Like they would never act like it ever existed. But instead, they actually kind of leaned into it and said, we're going to continue doing that. And now we're going to bring out Bruce Vaughn, who's back as the Chief Creative Officer of Walt Disney Imagineering. And really, the fact that Bruce Vaughn was at Disney years ago when it was very different, I think gives him credibility right off the bat. And he was involved in a lot of big attractions at the parks and has a bunch of experience in the industry and has heft. He comes on stage and he seems very different than some of the more recent Imagineers. Nothing against them, Chris Beatty or Zach Ridley or anyone, Bruce Vaughan is a bit older and was around at a different time for Imagineering. I don't want to make it seem like he's like 80 years old, but has a different level of experience, and the way he carries himself is just different. And Josh D'Amaro, talks to him and has him come out for this. And when they talk about Disney's Animal Kingdom, it's still called Blue Sky Conversations, but it seems a bit different now, where they're talking about Zootopia. That show seems pretty announced. A new show on Zootopia to replace It's Tough to Be a Bug. That doesn't sound like just a Blue Sky approach, which is really interesting, because I think the thinking was, if Disney decided to do Zootopia at Disney's Animal Kingdom, they would bring in the Zootopia attraction, some variation of it, Hot Pursuit, from Shanghai, which never felt like a great fit here anyway. I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole of Zootopia and whether it fits. I know Joe Rohde's opinion from what we've heard about whether they wear pants and everything else, but also a lot of fans, understandably so, have strong opinions about the Animal Kingdom and Zootopia not fitting, given that it is about us and our connection to the animals and to nature, and having animals that in Zootopia kind of function like people seems a little strange. But with that said, if they could find the right approach for it, I understand the popularity of the film. And I think, obviously we don't know anything about it, but I think putting it in the Tree of Life, not having a Zootopia land, but instead, I enjoy It's Tough to Be a Bug. I think it's a good show, but I'm okay with, if you really want to get Zootopia into the Animal Kingdom, that is a place where you go, okay, this show, It's Tough to Be a Bug was there when I visited Disney's Animal Kingdom in May 1998, before the movie even came out. So it's been there since the start, and you hate to lose early attractions, but if done well, I think this is a good place for it, and much better than replacing Dinosaur, or even more kind of on the expansion level, doing an entire Zootopia land. I think what they're putting in Shanghai looks really cool, and I think is going to be a great land, and the attraction looks neat. So it's nothing about the attraction or that land at all, and all the work that's put in. I think it's going to be very cool. However, I do think in the Animal Kingdom, this feels like a better fit, and I think Disney recognized that and has made the adjustment. But even more, what's interesting and surprised me was the reimagining of Dino Land into a land based on tropical Americas, which they said was areas around the equator, the northern part of South America, and then part of Central America, which does lead into Encanto, which this feels like, I really appreciate. Regardless of the fact that this is definitely very character-based and IP-based, so I don't want to be too over the moon about it. But I appreciate that if they, like they've done with Africa and Asia, theme the land to a part of the world, and then hopefully you can have some animals from that area in some form, that then if you're going to have a land, so then it kind of fits with the rest of the park. You have Pandora, of course, but you have Africa, Asia, and then I don't know if you call it Tropical America or what they're going to ultimately call it, but another part of the world. And then, okay, now in this area, you put Encanto in there. At least Colombia, being in northern South America, fits better. And I find this more interesting than if they had just had an Encanto land in the Beyond Big Thunder portion. That's interesting. And not shocking, but okay, pretty cool. And then they finally, we've heard rumors, maybe it's just wishful thinking, about Indiana Jones appearing in the Animal Kingdom. Obviously, because the dinosaur ride system is the same as Indiana Jones at Disneyland and in Tokyo. So it makes sense. But I think, too, this interests me a bit more than if they just said, okay, now we're replacing Dino Land with an Indiana Jones land. Having an area that is themed to the tropical Americas, and then have Indiana Jones find a temple or something else in that area, it's more interesting too, because then again, you're still having, okay, we've got this IP. In Africa, you've got Festival of the Lion King. So that's again IP, but connected to the continent. And then, obviously in Asia, you have Expedition Everest, which is not an IP, but has almost become its own IP in a way. So to me, one, I also love that Indiana Jones attraction in California. Now, I would hope, I mean, they could do things similar, but I would hope it wouldn't be like an exact copy. I mean, that came out, we're coming up on 30 years ago. And you can use the ride system, you can use some of the same moments, but let's do some updates. I know they've continued to update the other versions, but if you can make it have a similar vibe, that would be cool and would be a home run for the park, because you know how popular Indiana Jones is at Disneyland. I had my experience where weren't able to ride it, which still makes me sad, but it's still arguably up there as one of the most popular attractions at Disneyland in either park, but even in the Disneyland park. I mean, yes, you have Rise of the Resistance, but there aren't that many attractions that draw longer lines and more crowds and that people enjoy more than Indiana Jones. Animal Kingdom, you have a situation. Dinosaurs is a nice ride. I like it. But looking ahead, you have, hopefully something that draws from Encanto. And then you got Everest, you've got Kilimanjaro Safaris, you've got Flight of Passage in Pandora. It takes a lot of pressure off Pandora and off that entire other side of the park, where now you've got Everest plus Indiana Jones over here. Whew. It really spaces out the park well, and I think is very well needed. Especially, I hope because the thing about it is whenever you want to have additional capacity. And while Indiana Jones is going to draw more than Dinosaur, again, isn't going to hold a lot more people. But if you also add an Encanto attraction, hopefully beyond a meet and greet, like something really significant, then you're adding capacity, especially if you just take Primeval Whirl out of the picture. Hopefully, like it looks like they could still retain Triceratops Spin in the, theme to Encanto or to something similar. And then to the left, where Primeval Whirl and Chester and Hester's and all that would be more of Encanto. I don't know. I find this really interesting. And I think if you're going to have characters with whatever update you make to Disney's Animal Kingdom, I think this is a really smart move. And it surprises me because, and again, I don't want to put everything on Bruce Vaughan, but again, I mentioned kind of just being there in the past. If you really look at the concept art, there is a spot where you might still be able to have some sort of spinner. I mean, you also have like the Boneyard can still be a playground, and then you retheme Restaurantosaurus, you have Indiana Jones with Dinosaur, and then Encanto takes over. But I would think there might be a way. I mean, if they want to pull out Triceratops Spin, go for it. But you don't have to. But I would hope they would add another attraction to Encanto that would really expand the capacity of the park and not just do something simple. Like, let's really think of ways to not just say, oh, Indiana Jones were popular, so then they're going to use all the amount of people that they wouldn't use with Dinosaur. Let's look at Encanto, and that's really the key element of this. While I'm more excited about Indiana Jones, that area is going to be the part that they need in order to get people around the park and then continue to expand it. Number 3, Disney still really prefers to have a corporate sponsor on Epcot attractions before making updates. And I know this sounds a little negative, but it's not really. It's just interesting to me that I should start at the beginning, which is that Disney is going to update Test Track. Now, this is probably one of the most surprising things that I would not have expected. You could even say they're going to make an update to something at Epcot, and I'd be like, Nemo, Imagination. Just start going down the list. I'd be like, are they going to do something with Soarin'? Are they, I could probably go with Mission Space, everything, Spaceship Earth. No, Test Track. And on the surface, you'd be like, what? Why would they do that? But the big thing, they reference it. This is not like some surprise. During the announcement, they referenced Chevrolet they're going to work with them to remaster the Test Track experience. And then they reference the Spirit of Optimism from World of Motion will be added to this version of the attraction. And that's pretty cool. I know it's just a reference, but the fact that they even mention that means hey, it's not getting themed to cars. That's good. It's not something that's going to be dated really quickly. Even though I like Test Track 2.0, 1.0 had kind of the sense of humor and was funny and didn't take itself as too seriously. And then 2.0 has what I thought were some cool effects. And yes, you could say they were dated and all that. I mean, I know that the designing a car, my daughters love designing that car. And then it never really connected to the attraction. But my younger daughter, Etta, both the last few times we've gone and she's ridden it has been her favorite thing at the park. And she talks about it, that it's her favorite thing. And she loves Frozen more than Frozen Ever After, more than anything else. What I like about it is they showed, it's one piece of concept art, but the concept art shows you going and there's a bunch of trees. It's like a wooded area. And I'm like, oh, so this interests me. Because then you're putting physical sets in there possibly more than screens, which to me, you almost think of it like going through Radiator Springs and how cool that is to go through that kind of scenic route. And this, if they do that, it could really be neat. You could say, well, why are we working from strength? That is true. Test Track is still one of the most popular attractions in the park. Now Cosmic Rewind is more popular, and maybe Ratatouille, given that it's new, and Frozen's close. But Test Track remains, and has always remained since it's open, one of the most popular attractions in the park. It is so consistent. We've seen a drop-off with Soarin', partially because they added a third theater, but even with Soarin' around the world. Other attractions have been more popular, even Spaceship Earth, it's still popular. But Test Track has always been a super popular attraction, understandably so. It's loads of fun for a variety of reasons. But I'm okay with this. Also, this doesn't seem like something that will be closed for 5 years. If you think about how long they spent on Test Track 2.0, it was long, but it wasn't insanely long. And this does follow a pattern where in 1999 it opened. Then they updated in 2012. Now they're updating it probably 2024, I would guess. But that's really cool. And so let's assume, I think maybe this is something you could do in a year, in 9 months, 15 months, something like that, where you already have the ride system. And yes, there's a lot of components to update, but it's not starting from scratch. I like updates that can be done quicker and that are cool and seem like they will keep Test Track from adding an IP and kind of being its own thing for a long time. And it's possible that also Chevrolet really wants to think of the idea of an electronic vehicle, with all electronic cars being a bigger thing. And that could be a big part of it too. And you see, there's the sun in the concept art. Like, the sun is powering you. Hey, that's cool. That fits with the idea of Future World. I'm good with that. Going back to the sponsorship, I kind of said that in jest, but it is interesting to think about when you look about, okay, if somebody just said, what does Epcot need? We're assuming Journey of Water is open. More on that in a minute. And we've got the Central Spine, Communicator Hall, all that's open. So what's next for Epcot? You'd be like, okay, fix Imagination, number 1. Number 2, Nemo needs help. 3, Spaceship Earth needs help, maintenance, and the descent. Okay, 4, how about a new country? Get rid of the Beauty and the Beast film. Let's get the new China film. And there's all these things. You're going down the whole list. Maybe you could do something with Grand Fiesta Tour. Would you bring in Coco? Okay, Mission Space could use some help. You go through the whole list and you never get to Test Track. But the reason the Test Track jumps the line is because Chevrolet. And this also is the reason why Test Track got an update the first time when other attractions are being changed or closed or whatever, and Test Track remains strong. Partially, Test Track's very popular. So it does kind of fall into that Pirates, Haunted Mansion, other attractions people love, Imagineers like to work on. That's easy. But they reference Chevrolet. This has to do with the sponsor. But still, I'd much rather see them. Yes, they need to work on Imagination. That is smart. That is what they have to do. Not doing it, though, apparently. But I think they'll get to it. I think maybe that's next year, similar to Tomorrowland at Disneyland. But having Test Track get updated, I think will be a good thing. Number 4, Disney is picking up the pace on projects and giving clearer opening dates. Well, mostly. So this is going to kind of cover a lot of the announcements that we haven't really talked about up to this point. What I appreciate is there are a lot of things coming fairly soon. And in a few cases, Disney actually gave an exact date. So let's talk about Luminous. This is the nighttime spectacular in Epcot. It debuts on December 5th, 2023. We actually get a date. That's kind of cool. The name, okay, it's all right. I guess it's not the worst thing. Luminous, the Symphony of Us. But we get an exact date. So if you are someone who really wants to see it, or someone who really loves Epcot forever, I'm sure, you know exactly when it's going to start. Thank you, Disney. Even better, Moana Journey of Water. Journey of Water, inspired by Moana, is going to open officially October 16th. Now, granted, a lot of people, including people that were in the audience, they seem to get everything. They get the $100 gift card option. They're getting bags of stuff from Lug, the live stream sponsor. They're also getting to go and see Journey of Water, inspired by Moana. And I had a friend who was at Diz Parks on Twitter. He was able to get there and showed a few pictures, and it looks really cool. I'm like, hey, looks cool. Now, granted, I don't want to get too thrilled. It is a walk-through attraction. Another thing, too, is they did confirm that there'll be a Moana meet and greet there, which is a no-brainer. I think that's fine. But I like that they gave us an exact date. They didn't just say November, December, whatever. Now, on the other hand, Disney did not do such a great job in a few other cases where they're still not they come out. Daniel Joseph comes out, talks about the Hatbox Ghost, has some fun moments with the Muppets late November. I don't blame Daniel for this. That's just Disney. But really, you don't know what date it's coming yet. Come on, guys. So Hatbox Ghost, so late November. We learned that Ahsoka is going to be added to Star Tours. So that is what the new destinations they talked about at Star Wars Celebration. It's related to Ahsoka next spring. That's cool. I mean, spring, I would like to know a closer date. But I appreciate that even spring is fairly soon. I mean, we found out it's going to be Ahsoka, and they're already telling us that. Another thing we've learned later in the day, Soarin' Over California, returning for a limited time to Epcot September 22nd. That's really soon. Also, Soarin' Over California should play everywhere. And I know you could say, well, Epcot should be around the world because, that's what Epcot focuses on. I'm sorry, Soarin' Over California is just a much better attraction. It's too bad when we went to Disneyland, we missed by less than a month. We missed being able to see Soarin' Over California. We did around the world. It was fine. But it's one of those where I ride it and I enjoy it, but it's like I almost sometimes forget. Like we didn't even ride it the last time we were at Disney World because we were at the other side of the park and I'm like, I don't know. I've seen enough. Soarin' Over California would basically, I know this is limited time, but let's say it's still playing when I get back to Epcot. That becomes the number one thing I want to do there. Yes. Number 2 is Cosmic Rewind, which I haven't done yet. And 3 is Living with the Land. I'm not going to do the whole list. That's not important. But Soarin' Over California is one of the transcendent attractions I've ever experienced at a park. I come out of that every time I can't believe what we can do. And I feel that a bit with Flight of Passage, especially the first time, but Soarin' Over California is just so powerful and so well done. And the fact that they are bringing it back to Epcot, part of Disney 100, and you could say, well, yeah, they need to do something. It's cool. It shows recognition that they know people like it more. The fact that it keeps appearing in California and now is going to be there for Disney 100, and I know it's a way to draw people and locals and everything else. I want to go ride it. I'm like, yes, let me book a trip. Come on. Another thing, too, the ending. Let's talk about the ending. Oh, so funny. The big build-up, they start playing One Little Spark, and then out comes Big Figment. Or walk out tall Figment, super big Figment, whatever you want to call it. I like Big Figment. I like that. I laughed so hard. And it's nothing against it being it's as good as you're going to do with a tall Figment. But so funny. Oh my gosh. I loved it. And the best news is Figment's going to be there. Actually, by the time you hear this podcast, we could meet him. They say tomorrow, but what I heard, Figment was already out tonight. Disney's learned a little bit because Disney rarely does this where something is so quick. And this is what Universal does so well. Where the Velocicoaster was being built for so long before they recognized it was there. Kong, the same thing. Whereas they're building the Kong head. It's come on, guys, tell us what this is. Disney, I don't think Disney's going to get on that level, but Disney is learning the power of quick turnarounds. Think about all the things. And yes, we did know about them. But just the things they talked about that are actually going to be in the parks in the next few months. I'm going to go through the list. I'm not even thinking in terms of overseas, where we saw a preview of World of Frozen and Wanderer Oaken Sliding Sleighs in Hong Kong, which looks awesome. The Frozen Land, my goodness. If they put that in Magic Kingdom beyond Big Thunder, it feels weird to say that because I'd like them to move away from something else, but I think it would be awesome. It really would. But you think about what's coming on the way very soon. You've got Journey of Water. I know that's been being built forever, but it's going to be there. It's going to be there very soon. a new Epcot Nighttime Spectacular, December 5th. You've got Figment there now. You've got Hatbox Ghost coming in late November. By the spring, you've got Ahsoka. Apparently, Asha from the Disney movie Wish is going to also be appearing at Epcot. I'm not sure when. But just a lot of things. All of a sudden, I don't know, just the delay and everything, you look at it and you go, okay, things are starting to line up where Disney's going to have a lot of cool stuff coming. And so Northern California, like I just mentioned, all those were going to be in place very soon. And I think that's great. Now, the reason I said mostly at the beginning is because Disney's still slow rolling. Even though I'm excited about Disney's Animal Kingdom, I want to know, okay, we're doing this and the construction starts here. One, if people want to ride Dinosaur again, they would like to know that. And two, then you can kind of plan it out. Say, okay, let's say construction started today. Or, let's say October 1st to make it easier. You got to think at least 3 years, probably longer. But let's say Disney's really fast tracking it and they don't have supply issues like they have with Tron and everything else. Best case, 3 years is October 1st, 2026. And that's best case, and they haven't started yet. But that kind of gives you an idea of if things get pushed back and they don't start this till the spring, or even they decide not to really push it till next D23 Expo next year in August, then we're talking 2027 at a minimum. And it could be later. And so that's when they start to talk about Beyond Big Thunder. Like, that's another thing Bruce Vaughn talked about when he came out with Josh D'Amaro. And he says, Beyond Big Thunder is going to go into overdrive. That's the description. And he compared it to Pandora and Galaxy's Edge. This is all good news. This is all cool. But when it still seems so far into the future, let's say, optimistically, we have Animal Kingdom updates fall 2026, optimistically. You got to think the Magic Kingdom is a year or two later at best. And similar to, we saw a video, which I'm glad they confirmed it, because I was starting to wonder if this was a thing that was actually going to happen. And that is the King Thanos attraction at Disney California Adventure. One of the few examples during this presentation where we saw something big that was going to be at California. Now, this has been announced in the past, but there's a commercial, where it's basically, they described Avengers Campus as the hub of a new multiverse experience where you can go on missions to new worlds. It'd be really cool if you could do multiple missions and different things on this, not just one mission. They've started to do something similar, like songs and different things with Cosmic Rewind and all that. I would love it if they would set it up, not fall into the Smuggler's Run trap, and have you do different things. That would be awesome. But I'm just glad they confirmed that. But again, we don't know when. So same time frame, you figure they might be working on it a lot, but you probably add 3 years, at least 2, to whatever they say. So while I'm impressed, I like that Disney is giving us more concrete dates. Good job. Keep that up. If anyone from Disney hears this, you don't have to give us the exact day every time, but how about the month? The month is good. Even Hatbox Ghost, I appreciated it said late November. That's better than late 2024 or winter or something like that. I know you don't need to tell us what's coming 3 years from now, but you got to be able to tell us what's coming a month from now or 2 months or whatever. People plan their trips around these things, even small things. So that's something we need to do. Number 5, Disney songs are still a key part of upcoming attractions, but that's possibly not a bad thing. Now, essentially what I'm talking about is 2 attractions. I already mentioned Luminous, the Symphony of Us, and they described it as a brand new show with fireworks, fountains, lasers, lighting effects, and fabulous Disney music. You got me. Fireworks, fountains, great. Lasers, lighting effects. Disney music. Could we at least incorporate the really cool Epcot theme that was created and performed at D23 Expo? I think it was D23 Expo 2019, if I'm remembering correctly. I think that might have been it. Don't quote me on the year. Maybe that, along with others, makes me wonder if a lot of this is just, well, we removed the barges from Harmonious, and we're making some updates, and obviously going to have some different music. It's not going to be the same. But a lot of this seems like kind of a course correction of a similar show. And it doesn't surprise me. If you're going to have this quick of a turnaround, really complicated brand new shows with original soundtracks take years to develop. And this seems like something where maybe they might even use some of what they used before. I'm going to stay optimistic because I got to say Happily Ever After, which mostly I've watched on live streams, because it hasn't been around for a while. And then I love it so much. I want to see it in person again. And that's something I really want to make time to see. So it's all Disney music. And it's great. It's possible. I mean, it doesn't always fit well for Epcot for me. That's a much longer, larger discussion. It doesn't surprise me that it's Disney music. I always want to think, oh, they're going to do all original music. I just hope that they incorporate themes related to Epcot. You don't have to do Epcot forever, but maybe a little bit of that. But then also some of the newer themes they're doing at Epcot with kind of classic Disney songs. I'm not going to judge it until I see it, and I'm not even sure if seeing it at home is really going to do it, because Epcot Forever sure doesn't play at home at all. That doesn't mean it's terrible or anything. It's not. We'll see what happens with Luminous. But of course, this leads me to the other big surprising announcement, which I've been holding off discussing here to the end, which is the Country Bear Jamboree, which is going to get new songs and a whole new act, focusing on different genres of country music, rockabilly, bluegrass, pop country. Oh, let's just focus on rockabilly and bluegrass. And I have very mixed feelings about this. I saw an interesting post from Ethan Reed, who's been a guest on this show a bunch of times, talking about how he had pitched an update in 2004, 19 years ago. And he talks about he was the conceptual creative director coming up with new versions for this attraction from 2018 to 2020. Ethan Reed is such a huge fan of Mark Davis and of just classic Disney. And I know whatever he pitched would have had just been, respectful of what the Country Bear Jamboree is. And that doesn't mean it's going to be good or bad. But seeing that, I went, okay, all right, that makes me feel a little better. Because there's always the initial thought of right away, you have this thought like, oh gosh, this is terrible. This is awful. What are they doing? What are they doing? They don't know what they're doing. Logically, they're not removing the show. And I know people have posted online already that you can justify anything if you think this, well, it's not as bad as it could be. That is true. But this is, a situation where the Country Bears will still be there performing. And they're going to get the top-notch artist to play these songs. That's good. Those two things are good. I'm sure they'll use the latest sound system. Everything's going to sound great. It's going to look great. It's going to be a popular show. Those things are great. It's also not being removed. This is not like at Disneyland where they removed the Country Bear Jamboree for Winnie the Pooh. This is not on that level. That's good too. The thing that concerned me a bit was when they went to show the music they were playing, and it was the Bare Necessities from the Jungle Book. That doesn't excite me as much. And then I read a little bit more about the description, and it talks about how they are doing classic versions of classic Disney songs. Don't love that either completely. Disney songs in country music. But again, I know they're going to do a good job of this, so I think it'll be interesting and fun if you separate it from the fact that it feels a little less original to use the Disney songs. Now, I will also recognize that similar to other attractions like Pirates and the Jungle Cruise, elements of some of the songs in the Country Bear Jamboree were definitely outdated in terms of cultural depictions. That's the term they always use on Disney Plus, outdated cultural depictions, whatever you want to call it. I do think it's an attraction that could use some updating. Of course, there's Carousel of Progress over there too that could use some updates in that realm. So I think this is part of it. I think they did decide that while the original Country Bear Jamboree is a classic and is so much fun in a lot of ways, they did want to update it. And also, they are thinking in terms of younger audiences who don't have the history with the show, and they want to connect this to Disney songs they know, even if it's a variation. So I understand the logic behind it. I appreciate that we will still have an attraction at Frontierland called the Country Bear Jamboree with Big Al and Henry and Romeo McGraw. That's different. Teddy Bear, Trixie, a whole group. So that's good. I just hope they find a way also to add in some songs from the original show. Like, you don't have to do all of them. You could do, this kind of the song that leads off. I really like the song at the end. You could do that. So there are, there's songs that they can put in there, especially Big Al. I feel like Big Al's song is one of those. I mean, yeah, Blood on the Saddle. It's not real upbeat, but having Big Al sing a Disney song to me just seems weird. It feels a lot like Tiki Room Under New Management, which I know some people really like, and it has its fans, but it's a little shaky. I appreciate they're doing something there, and it's not themed to Woody from Toy Story. It's not some dramatic update that just guts it completely. And I'm going to wait and see, and I hope that it's a show that really pays tribute to the original, and then, okay, they're going to bring in some Disney songs, but they'll do the best they can. I'm going to say cautiously optimistic at this point. One other thing I wanted to mention before we finish, an update that I haven't talked about, is there is going to be a lounge themed to Pirates of the Caribbean with the Barker bird. They found a way to connect to a figure that is no longer there, but this is fine. I don't have a problem with it. Maybe I suspect they're going to put it where Tortuga Tavern is, which is often closed. I think it's an okay idea. No notes. I don't have a strong opinion. At least they're not spending their efforts making more updates to inside the attraction of Pirates, because I want to see them work on other attractions like Country Bear Jamboree. But having this another place you can go hang out, I assume no alcohol there, though I'm not sure. I don't know how that's going to connect to kind of how they do things with the restaurants versus the other areas. So we'll have to see about that, but that's going to be interesting too. They also did show updates, like I mentioned, from Tokyo, from Hong Kong. I think the Fantasy Springs looks really cool. Just talked to a guest that we haven't aired it yet, but who was involved with that before he left Disney, and he's very optimistic about it. Says it's super cool and we're going to love it. And I'm convinced. Also, we see a little bit from Zootopia Hot Pursuit. Those all seem fun. I wish I could go see them very soon, but it's probably not going to be the case anytime in the near future. We also saw a little more information about Tiana's Bayou Adventure, and still looking good. I'm excited to see where that goes. And then Disney Cruise Line. The Disney Cruise Line guy was so funny. The way he held so long for the name Lookout Key at Lighthouse Point, and then talked about the name of the new ship, the Disney Adventure. I did enjoy also Heather, who won a trip and could bring 3 guests. And they got to stop the presentation for a minute. Then she came up and she was so excited. She was wearing a mask, so you couldn't see her face. You could just tell she was just so thrilled. And that was a fun moment too. Yes, you could be like, well, this kind of stopped the presentation, but it was very funny. And I appreciate that side of it too. Like I've talked about before, I've never been on a Disney cruise. It's not really my thing. I have nothing against Disney Cruise Line. I know they do a great job. We saw a lot of updates recently about the Disney Treasure, and now we know about the Disney Adventure. I'm always interested in what they're doing on the ships, but that's about as far as it goes, really. I did find it interesting we didn't learn some more updates. Like, they didn't talk any more about the Haunted Mansion updates at Disneyland. I thought we might learn a little bit more there. Also, we didn't hear anything about the Adventureland Treehouse, which I thought we might hear updates on that front. Just not a lot of Disneyland. I guess it makes sense when you're at Walt Disney World to kind of focus more there. But I was a little surprised we didn't hear a little more about any updates in California. I thought Josh D'Amaro would want to talk more about the amazing restaurants at Downtown Disney. Nothing about that. But this was really themed more towards Walt Disney World and some of the things we're doing there, with it taking place in Florida at Destination D23. So on an overall scale, I know this has been pretty quick, but my thought was I wanted to do about this amount of time to give my quick updates, especially coming from a hotel room in Ohio. But I wanted to get them out and really think through. I thought through a lot of it while I was driving today, about a 5.5, 6 hour drive. I would just say, if I was going to grade this based on what we know now, the presentation, the amount of announcements they made, what the announcements were, I'd say B or B plus. I'd say B plus. I think I come out of it going, I can see the logic behind most of this. I have a little bit of hesitation about Country Bear Jamboree updates and about Luminous. But again, neither one is one where I think, oh my gosh. And I do wish we knew a little more concrete dates on things like Beyond Big Thunder, and especially the Animal Kingdom updates. I think they've really got to start moving on this. I'm not saying it's a response. I don't think anything here was really a response to Epic Universe. I think they're just trying to kind of go to their core and what they do. Also, we didn't hear anything about Disney Genie Plus, which surprised me a little bit, given the fact that they are going to be making some changes there. But this was a bit different in that Chapek always really loved to talk about the products and Disney Genie and Hey Disney and all these things. And I don't think tomorrow he's more of a parks guy. And I also think since they've kind of switched, they've really moved away from, they'll reference consumer products, but they don't talk about it really at all. And I think that's great. I'm fine with that. I'm sure we'll learn about things in the future. This was focused on the parks. They had a lot of announcements, a lot of previews. I think it did its job well. Sure, I think they still need to move quicker, and they need to do something with Imagination and Tomorrowland at Disneyland. Those are on my wish list. I know that Disney as a company has different wish lists. Every fan does. So we'll see what happens. It doesn't mean they're not going to announce anything more at all about this, Maybe we'll hear more things in a few months, maybe not. I'm cautiously optimistic a lot of this. Some of this I'm just overly optimistic, like the updates to Test Track or Soarin' over California coming back, or even Animal Kingdom. I'm mostly optimistic there. So a lot of good things, and it gives me a little more hope. I still think there's more things they need to do in terms of the guest experience, but in terms of what they're going to do with the parks, I think. Whereas after last year's D23, I had some significant concerns. Now I'm like, I think they're starting to right the ship with the parks. They just need to do these things and continue to do more things, especially related to guest experience. They got the trams back, but there are other things they need to do. I really think they need to consider some kind of alternative to Magical Express if they can't bring that back. Updates to Genie Plus, some of those areas. A lot of these changes are a step in the right direction. So that's going to be it. I would love to hear what you think of my takeaways. Did you have different takeaways? I'm sure you probably did. Send me an email, dan@tomorrowsociety.com. You can follow me at basically every social media platform at Tomorrow Society, except Twitter is just at Tomorrow SOC. If you'd like to help support the show, you can always become a member through Patreon and get access to some really cool perks. Go to patreon.com/Tomorrow Society to learn more. You can also make a one-time contribution and buy me a Dole Whip. Go to tomorrowsociety.com/Dole Whip. I'd love it if you could leave ratings on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever they accept ratings. It really helps for more people to find out about the show. If you'd like to check out all my past episodes, go to tomorrowsociety.com/podcast with an S at the end. And really, I just want to say that it's so much fun to get to talk about things coming to the parks and speculate and think about them. That continues to be super fun for me. And I'm thrilled to find out what's coming in the future. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Would love to hear what you think about it. It's still a fun time to be a fan of the parks. That's my biggest summary from all of it. The music for this episode was written by Adam Hookey, performed by the Sophisticated Babies. Next time, I'll be talking with Imagineer Greg Combs about his career working on so many cool attractions like Indiana Jones, Tower of Terror, Journey to the Center of the Earth in Tokyo, so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. It was a lot of fun for me. Hope you're all doing awesome out there. Thanks so much. I'll talk to you again very soon.